Hi, my name's Colin Telford. I'm a technician and I work in the University of Wales, Trinity St David's in the Design and Crafts department. We're going to do a few short training videos for you covering the basics of working with glass. So on this first one, we'll go through a bit of the health and safety and how to approach cutting a large sheet of glass. So basically what we need to do is we need to cut this large sheet of glass down into small sections. So first of all, always with health and safety is you've got to think that you're safe doing it. So if you're carrying large sheets of glass, you will need a wrist guard, something to stop your wrist from getting cut. Obviously, we all know how vulnerable your wrists are, so when you're carrying any large sheets of glass, you need wrist protections. And you can get these from any glazier's shop, any health and safety shop. You can just put those on there. And there. And then that's our protection for any cut or glass that may damage the wrist. So, next thing you need is a good pair of cut-proof gloves. Don't skimp on the gloves. Make sure they're cut-proof. And again, any health and safety supplier will sell you the appropriate cut-proof gloves. This is basically for carrying, because obviously a sheet is heavy and the edges are sharp. So you need to make sure that your hands are protected and the wrists. And the other thing is obviously safety goggles. Okay, again, all sorts of different safety goggles. I've got spectacles myself, so I need a pair of safety goggles which will go over my specs. These are over spec safety goggles, or your normal safety goggles if you don't wear the specs. Okay, I'm going to put my normal glasses on because I don't need those for this process. Okay, right, so the other thing to discuss before you go to it is your cutters. So here, if you're a glass artist or stained glass artist, you are probably used to this kind of cutter. Oil fed, goes through to the tip, oils the cutter as you go along. Now look how narrow that is. That's narrow for a reason. Because you're following a cut line, right, you need to know where the wheel is. You've got no guide, you're just doing it hands-free. On the sheet cutter, the head is a lot wider. So you can see the difference there, okay? And you can see on mine, it's worn where it's continually running against the ruler, okay? The reason for that is that the actual head, when it's against the ruler, there's a lot of contact, so it can't twist. It stays as it is, and it runs nicely against the ruler. Where a thinner head, right, has the opportunity of twisting and cutting into the edge of the ruler. Okay, so most sheet cutters will have a wide head. You don't have to. When you get really good at it, you can use both, but most sheet cutters will use a wide head for good contact against the ruler. Alright, now let's speak about rulers as well. I have seen so many videos where people are cutting glass with a metal ruler like that. Really thin on the edge. It's impossible to do it well, because what happens is there is no contact between the head and the cutter, and what happens is the cutter runs over and the wheel hits the edge of the ruler, and instead of cutting the glass, it will just skid and your line will run off. If you're using a ruler for cutting glass, you need something like this, a nice wide edge, okay? So there's good contact between the head and the ruler, and there's no chance of that wheel running over the edge of the actual ruler. Alright? These sort of things you can buy in any stained glass craft shop or whatever. These are a little bit more specialist, but again, a glass supplier will have to sell you those long straight edges. Okay? So, the other thing we need to discuss about the cutter is the wheel. When you buy cutters, it will give you the offset measurement. That's basically, if you look at the head, your wheel is set in the center of the head. So the off stand is actually that distance from that edge of the cutter to the centre of the wheel. So most cutters are about 2.5. So when you make your measurements, you've got to allow for that on your measurement. Okay, so we're going to go through that now. Here, we're just going to split this big sheet in half. Okay, make sure that that's there. Okay, then when you're measuring, you need a good tape measure. So our standoff here is 2.5 mil. By the way, I'm left-handed, so if you're right-handed, you'll be working the opposite way to me. So I'm going to cut this sheet at 500. Okay, there. Now, if I set that at 500 and then put my cutter on, you can see the wheel actually will cut at 498. All right, because of that offset. So what I've got to do, if I want this piece of glass to be 500, is set this 502.5. Okay, 502.5. Always check up the actual glass to make sure that it's run square. All right, so you can see now that when I put my cutter on, the wheel is actually on the 500. Okay, if you're doing it right-handed, you'll be taking 2.5 off because you're working the opposite way. All right. I don't wear gloves for cutting, only for carrying. All right. You now got to run your cutter against the edge of the ruler. Now, this is not as easy as it looks, because some people do struggle with this. Okay. So when you're cutting a sheet, you always pull down. Okay, never push up, because if you push up, there's a good likelihood that you could run off of the cut or run off the ruler. Whereas if you pull down and you keep your body behind the cutter, so if you look at where I'm standing, I'm cutting left-handed, obviously, I'm going to run the cutter down like this. Look, my body is to this side, so my hand can easily run through. If I stand here, as I come down to the end of the cut, my body's in the way, and then you could quite easily run off. So you need to be able to move out the way. And by having my body on this side, it naturally keeps the cutter against the ruler's edge. Okay? Now, we're going to oil the cut. Most of you, if you cut glass, you know to oil your cut first. But we oil it for a reason. If we do a dry cut, so this cutter's got no oil in, okay, and I haven't dipped it into the head. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do a cut with this dry, and then I'm going to do a cut with my sheet cutter with oil on, okay, and hopefully Gary on the camera can pick this up. So as I push down, you will see the glass starts to fragment at the edge. You'll get little chipping, and if you've done that yourself, you'll know, you'll hear your glass, it's like snap, crackle and pop cereal. It just starts to, as these little bits of glass start to jump out. And that's doing is, if you imagine when you make a cut in glass, it's like a sharp V, okay, it's a fault line, and wherever you make that cut, it will run. Now, if it starts to fragment like that, it becomes not a V, but almost like a ditch, becomes rounded. It's a wider fault, and that will make that actually run off. If you're trying to break it, it will get to a certain point where the ditch has got so wide, it won't know which way to go. Okay, so that's the dry cut, and then we're just going to do that with my oil cut. You won't be able to see this cut, Gary, with that camera, I wouldn't have thought. It's got oil on. There you go. The oil will fill the void, which you've just pressed down on, and stop that fragmentation. So your cut should be good for a while. Okay, so you can't see that. If I just try and lift that up, you can see that one there, but you can't see, all you can see is the oil. Even if I rub that out the way, you can't see the cut. All right, that's why we use oil. So one, we don't get all these bits of glass going into our wheel, and instead of our wheel spinning, it might actually skid across the glass and it won't make the cut. All right. These cutters have got oil in them. Mine's old and it doesn't work much anymore, and I prefer just to smack that in the top. Okay, first of all, I'll just do a dry run. So look, make sure I can reach the edge. If you notice, my table is quite low, so I can reach. I'm just going to come down and make sure I can get all the way down. And if you watch my body, I will move out the way. My hand will be in the centre of the ruler, pressing down, so the ruler doesn't move. And the edge is actually on the edge of the glass. Okay, so now I'm going to cut this. I'm going to lean over, keep it as vertical as I can, and then I'm going to come down, move my body behind the ruler, just keep going, and off. Right? Once you've done that, all you need to do, if your cut's good, get your finger, and I'm just going to lift this glass just a little bit, and you watch the run. Okay, it will go all the way up the edge there. Ready? Look at that. There you go, and that's your sheet. For more guides we're working with glass, explore our other videos through the Craft Hub platform.